Well, the mill is located on the Paulins Kill in the town of Stillwater, which is in the western part of Sussex County, New Jersey. And it gives me a lot of pleasure to see equipment that was built over 100 years ago still operating in the same manner that it did at the time it was put in there. Casper Schaefer built the first mill in 1741, and then he built a bigger mill at the present site in 1764. And I imagine Schaefer and his sons built it together, being a large family. Back in those days, the mill was self-contained. The power was there by itself, and the miller and most of the people living there were independent of anybody else. They grew their own food, and it was more a nature of living, which I enjoy myself. This is the way people lived in those days. They didn't need the outside help for the community to survive. Nowadays, the family as a unit usually works at a different place, where back in the 1800s, the family worked as one unit on the farm.
Well, I just like to get out one of the old wagons, hitch her up, and go down and pick a load of corn by hand, and then grind it the old way and kind of think about the nice quiet life of years ago. You can use corn, you can cut it early when it's still green and cut it up in little pieces and feed it to the dairy, to the pigs. Or you can wait till it gets hard in the fall and then harvest it out by either picking it by hand, or now we have the corn pickers. But whether it's picked by hand or picked by the machine, it doesn't make any difference to the corn. Well, we have to figure out how far we have really progressed and how far has progress really brought us. We have to stop and look back on it. It was a much more quieter life when we would go out with the horse and wagon. We could hear the dinner bell ring from the house when I'm using the tractor. If the wife rings the dinner bell, you can't hear that anymore. You have much more time to think, because you don't have to worry about the tractor running over or something. You just can pick at your own speed there. There's no rush.
Well, the mill is driven by a water turbine, which is placed in under the mill. So there is a raceway there, a small dam and a raceway. And by dropping the gates in this raceway, it raises the water to the sufficient height in the front of the mill so that it can drop through the turbine to give you the power when the water runs through. Well, the mill is driven entirely by the water power, and that water is put back into the stream in the same exact condition that it came out of the stream. Watch the bell that is on the main drive shaft that swings out due to centrifugal force. And of course, the further out it is, the faster your mill is running, the faster you can feed the grain into the stone.
We can go down to the mill with our own grain, which we raise on the farm. We don't need any electric. We can grind our own flour. We can sift it and take the bran out of it and make white flour. And we can bring it home, and the women will make us bread and muffins, and we don't have to go to any store or all the ingredients we can raise right on our own farm and be self-sufficient on our own.
get the most out of the grain, the most food value, it has to be ground up. And of course, to grind this, you had to have the water power. There was no internal combustion engines or no electricity, no natural gas, and therefore the farmers in Stillwater were fortunate in having the Paw and Kill running through the valley because this afforded plenty of water power to drive their machinery. All mills had a rope hoist on the outside that you lowered the rope down to the farmer in the wagon outside. He fastened the bag onto the rope, and then by tightening a series of belts, it drives a wooden spool on the top floor, and this winds the rope up. Well, this was a small industry that was actually run by one man, including all the maintenance work. They did not hire outside people. The machinery was all such that the man could maintain it and run it himself without outside help. So this made it, again, coming back to the original concept of being independent of other people to keep these machines going. Then it's dropped into the bends, and mostly by gravity, the grain drops to the back down to wherever you want it on each floor. Well, the grain is dropped into the hoppers, and this fed it into the cleaning machine, which took all the foreign material, dust, and anything that the threshing process had left. Well, to make cornmeal, you have to separate the kernels from the cob because the cob is not really digestible as far as humans are concerned. So you have to shell the grain from the cob and run it through the cleaner to clean it. This mill grinds entirely by stones. By stones we mean two round stones, one set in the floor, the other revolving over top of it, very close together. And as the grain drops through a hole in the center of the stone, and this causes it to grind as it spreads out in between the two stones and falls out on the outside of the stone. The reason the stone ground flour is better is that it's ground slower and there's not the terrific heat that's generated when it's ground with a metal grinding process. This scorches the flour. Well, when the mill was rebuilt in 1844, a man by the name of Oliver Evans had perfected the automatic ways of transferring your grain through the mill. And these elevators consist of long belts with small cups on them which run continuously within small hoppers. This picks up the grain and moves it from one floor to the other. The old millers looked at the mill as a means of making their livelihood, where today it's looked upon as a working antique.
Nowadays, our taxes have gone up so high, it's so hard to hold on to these antique mills like this, and there's not too many farmers left. All businessmen that work in the city, they moving up to the country here and bought the farms up, so that's making it hard to stay in business as a mill. There's not that many farmers, only one or two farmers left in the whole township of Stillwater, where before there was probably a few hundred.
Well, when the miller ground the feed, he took out a portion of the, what they call the toll, a certain portion of the grain for his pay, and he also took some of it home for his own use because most of the millers did not have farms of their own.
About 2 years ago, when the bread in the store started going up, I decided I was not going to buy any bread in the store anymore. And I started for quite a while. We ate just the bread that we made. And natural bread has more flavor than the bread that you buy in the stores, in this area anyway. In the city, you can go to the Scandinavian bakers, the Jewish bakers, German, Lithuanian, almost any kind. You can find all sorts of bakeries in the city and get good bread. But here, we have to buy bread that is made in a factory. And I like the bread better that I make because it's rougher, and I think it tastes better. I think that is mostly why we use it. Mother made bread. I can remember Mother telling stories about when she first came to this country, getting up at 2 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock in the morning out in Iowa and made bread. And so I learned a little bit of making this, but this is one of my fond memories, so I naturally want to do the same thing with the kids. And they enjoy it. They love to do it. They love to make cookies, and they love to make bread. And it's just kind of something that they can do together with somebody, an older person, and it's not, you don't shove them off in a room watching television or something while you're doing something that's necessary. And they love to do it. They love the feel of the bread. So, and they like the accomplishment. They love to watch it rise and like to see it come out, see the bread come out of the oven, and they like to eat it. Having a family, you can't just expect everybody to get along. Everybody's got to work at it, but they're your family, and you love them, and you do for them. And I like to bake, and I like to work with the children.
Well, you know, this mill grinds pretty slow compared with the modern mills, but even though it is slow, the power source is free. And in this day and age, I think with the wasting of so much energy that we're using a natural resource here that doesn't cost anything and doesn't cost other people any energy either. And sometimes big isn't always the best way, and this makes you think that maybe the old way of doing things was a lot better. For me anyway, I like doing things the old way because to me it just seems like a better way of life.